This week's Parsha, Matot Masei. Let's just go straight into the sources and we discuss it after. It says like this: ומקנה רב היה לבני ראובן ולבני גד עצום מאוד. So the tribes of Reuven and the tribe of Gad had a lot of flocks, had a lot of cattle, had a lot of sheep. ויראו את ארץ יעזר ואת ארץ גלעד. And they went through the land of Yezer and the land of Gilad. והנה המקום מקום מקנה. And the place is a place for a good place for flocks. This is on the other side of the Jordan where Sichon was. They just beat Sichon and they're noticing, hey, this is a great place for our flocks. ויבואו בני גד ובני ראובן. So what happened? The sons of Gad and son of Reuven came. ויאמרו אל משה ואל אלעזר הכהן. They went to Moshe and to Elazar the Kohen. Notice Aaron is already passed away over here. So this is Elazar, his son, who took over. ואל נשיאי העדה. So they're coming to Moshe, Elazar, the leaders, and this is what they're saying. So you remember, they were 40 years in the desert. Why? Because they didn't want to go into the land. You remember with the spies. Right now they're about to go into the land, and you would think they learned a lesson. But let's see what happens. And this is what it says. Haaretz asher hika Hashem lifnei adat Yisrael. It says, look, we just beat Sichon over here. We just won the war against them. Eretz miknehi. It says, look at the land. The land we just went and got over the Jordan is a great land. Ve'levadecha mikneh. And we have lots of flocks. Vayomru, and they said. So this is, they said, they come in front of Moshe, in front of Elazar, in front of the leaders, and this is what they're saying. Im matzanu chen be'enecha. It says, if we find favor in your eyes, yutan et haaretz azot la'avadecha la'achuza, al ta'avirenu et hayarden. It says, give us this land. Don't make us go over the Jordan. We like it over here. It's America. It's got good land over here. Why should we go over here? It's nice. And remember, this is after 40 years in the desert where they were punished for not wanting to go into the land. Let's continue. So let's look at what Moshe tells them. Vayomer Moshe livnei Gad ulivnei Reuven. So Moshe said in front of God, in front of the tribe of Gad and the tribe of Reuven. Ha'achechem yavou lemilchama. It says, you guys are chutzpahdik. You guys, I don't understand you. What are you thinking? You thinking your brothers are going to go to war to conquer the land of Israel? Va'atem teshvei po, and then you're going to sit over here? You're going to go on vacation? What are you thinking? ולמה תניעון את לב בני ישראל מעבור אל הארץ אשר נתן להם השם? And also you're giving them an example. Now nobody wants to go through. They see you settled over here. They're going to decide to settle over there. Over there there's going to be war. Other places there's not going to be war. Everybody will want America. Nobody will want to go into the land of Israel, this harsh land, and go over there. What are you doing? You're despondent the entire nation. So and it tells them, you know who you like? You're just like your forefathers. Ko asu avotechem, so did your forefathers. Beshalchi otam mikadesh barnea liron et haaretz. When I sent the spies from Kadesh Barnea to spy on the land, it says, you're doing the same mistake. Didn't you learn? ויעלו עד נחל אשכול. They went to the river of Eshkol. ויראו את הארץ. They also saw the land. They also saw the land. And just like them, ויניעו את לב בני ישראל לבלתי בוא אל הארץ שנתן להם השם. You're going to convince the Jewish people not to go into the land. He says, what kind of behavior is this? I don't understand you guys. Didn't you learn the lesson? ויחר, and then he tells them, and you remember the punishment that it was. ויחר אף השם בישראל, and God got angry at the Jewish nation, ויניעם במדבר 40 שנה, he made them travel in the desert for 40 years, עד תום כל הדור העושה הרע בעיני השם, until everybody from that generation passed away. והנה קמתם תחת אבותיכם תרבות אנשים חטאים לספות עוד על חרון אף השם אל ישראל. And you didn't learn. Just the same mistakes as your forefathers did. You're doing the same mistakes. וכי תשבון מאחריו ויאסף עוד להניחו במדבר ושיחתם לכל העם הזה. He says, what do you want? Another 40 years now? The first 40 years wasn't enough. You want 80 years to start walking in the desert? This is the conversation. Okay, let's continue. So then they have a solution. ויגשו אליו, so they approached him, they listened to what he said. ויאמרו, and they said to him, גדרות צאן נבנה למקננו פה. It says, no, you didn't understand us. It says, we didn't mean we're not going to go into war. That's not what we meant. It says, listen to what our plan is. Our plan is to build places for our flocks, וערים לטפנו, and cities for our young. ואנחנו נחלץ חושים לפני בני ישראל, and we are going to go and fight in the front lines. That was our plan. We were going to go and fight in the front lines, עד אשר אם הביאונו מעל מקומם, until we're going to conquer the entire land. In other words, we're not coming back over here. That was our plan from the beginning. So we're not, this was the plan. We're going to be on the front line. We're going to be, and they were. It says, Reuven and Gad were the warriors. They were the one who were on the front lines. וישב טפנו בערי המבצר מפני יושבי בארץ. We're going to pit our young folks and our women in the cities that were walled cities that were killed by, that they killed Sichon. לא נשוב אל בתינו, and we were not going to return to our land, עד יתנחל בני ישראל איש נחלתו, until we're going to conquer the entire land of Israel. So this is how they approached it, and this is what they told Moshe. Rashi says, if you look at the Rashi says, the way they said something over here was wrong. It wasn't the way Moshe liked it, and he's going to rebuke them about even this way. He says, what was wrong with it? So it says, listen to what it says. First of all, they were concerned about the flocks. It says, we're going to build places for our flocks. And then they says, and we're going to put our young ones and our wives in the cities. In other words, they were concerned more about the flocks than they were concerned about the women and the young. So this is what Rashi says. Nivne lemiknenu fo. We're going to build houses for our flocks. Chasim ayu, Rashi explains, Chasim ayu al mamonam yoter mibnehem. They had mercy more on their money more than their children. Uvnotehem. Shekdimu miknehem letapam, because when they told him the plan, what they're going to do, first of all, they were concerned about the flocks. Amar lahem Moshe. So Moshe said, Lo chen asu. Says, no, you're not doing it the right way. Asu ha'ikar ikar v'atafel tafel. You should do the main thing main, and the secondary thing secondary. What's the main thing? Bnu lachem tchila rim letapchem. First of all, you have to build cities for your young ones and for your wives. That's the most important one. V'achar ken gedrot letzonechem. And only after that, take care of your flocks. In other words, you have your concerns the wrong way around. This is he's rebuking them. But overall, it looks like Moshe is happy with the idea, with what the idea is. So let's see. Vayiten lahem Moshe livnei Gad ulivnei Reuven, and he gave to the Moshe, to the sons of Gad and to the sons of Reuven. And here comes the problem. Velechatzi shevet Menashe ben Yosef, and to half the tribe of Menashe, the son of Yosef. He says, where did Menashe come into the story? What does Menashe have to do with it? It's Reuven and Gad who ask for the land, and all of a sudden, Moshe is giving it to Reuven and Gad and half the tribe of Menashe. Which Menashe? Menashe, the son of Yosef. We're going to see why is that important soon. He gave them. So the question is, where did Menashe come from? And especially, why are you dividing a nation in half? What is that all about? You're dividing families. You're putting half a family over there, half a family over there. That's not a way to behave. You don't divide families. You don't divide tribes. And who asked you? Why did you decide that half the tribe of Menashe should go over there? So it says like this. So he gave them et mamlechet Sichon melech ha'emori, the kingship of Sichon, the king of the Amorite, ve'et mamlechet Og melech ha'Bashan, and the kingdom of Og, the king of the Bashan, ha'aretz le'area, he gave them the land and the cities, begvulot ha'arei ha'aretz aviv, with all its boundaries around. So let's try to understand this story. Page number 5. Odot Nachala Bever Yarden, when it discusses the inheritance of the land in the other side of the Jordan, מספרת התורה, the Torah tells us, שבני ראובן ובני גד ביקשו ממשה רבנו לתת להם את עבר ירדן לנחלה. The tribe of Reuven and Gad asked for this land. כאשר שמע משה את הדבר, when Moshe heard it, קצף עליהם, he was very angry. עד שקרא להם תרבות אנשים חטאים. He called them sinners. He says, you know what, you guys are sinners. You don't want to go into the land, just like the other guys. ורק שאמרו ואנחנו נחלץ חושים לפני בני ישראל, only when they say, no, we're also going to go into the land and we're going to win, we're going to fight the war. אז הסכים משה לתת להם אחזותם בעבר הירדן. Only then Moshe agreed to give them the land. If you think about it, it still doesn't make sense. Wasn't the whole point of inheriting the land of Israel? Wasn't that the whole point? Didn't they come out of Egypt to inherit the land of Israel? All of a sudden, this guy says, we don't want it. We're happy over here. What do you mean you don't want it, you're happy over here? And after they tell him, we're happy over here, but we're going to go and fight for you, he says, okay, then it's fine. Go stay over there. It's still a sin. Why is Moshe all of a sudden saying it's not a sin? It's still a sin. You shouldn't let them. So you should go with everybody to the land of Israel. So let's continue. והנה בכל המשך הכתובים הנזכרים לעיל, in all these verses that we just read, לא נזכרו לבני גד ובני ראובן. We only mentioned the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuven. ואילו בנוגע לנתינת אחוזת בעבר ירדן בפועל, when Moshe actually does it, he gives them the land, נאמר, it says, ויתן להם משה לבני גד ולבני ראובן ולחצי שבט מנשה. Moshe adds half the tribe of Menashe into the picture. So we have to understand what is going on over here. What's the story? What's happening? ומזה למדים שני עניינים. From here we're going to learn two things. Let's see what we're going to learn. Number one, העניין הבלתי רצוי שהיה בתחילה. First of all, what Moshe didn't like about. Obviously, he didn't mind them staying there, because otherwise he would have said, excuse me, guys, you shouldn't stay here. You should come with us to Israel. But he says, okay, guys, you can stay here as long as you help us. So what didn't he like? So what was his problem? So let's see. שקצף עליהם משה וכינה אותם בשם תרבות אנשים חטאים. He called them sinners. And it looks like, you know who did he call sinners? Only bnei Gad ובני Reuven. The ones who were sinners were only the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuven. Who wasn't a sinner? Menashe. It looks like Moshe thinks that to be on the other side of the Jordan is a good idea. And that's why he told Menashe to be there. It says, you guys, you know what, they're going to be there. You also be there.
Somebody has to be there.
Nobody has to be there. They can all go into the land of Israel. Moshe.
Why waste land that is yours? Wasting real estate.
What do you mean wasting real estate? It's like asking, why not go to America? Oh, why waste Israel? Why not go to Syria? Israel is the Holy Land. You go into the Holy Land. It doesn't make sense. Think about it. Obviously, there's something we're missing. We're not understanding, which we're going to discuss soon. ולא בנוגע לחצי שבט מנשה. He says it looks like when it comes to half the tribe of Menashe, he actually wanted him there. וכמו כן מצינו שהעניין של נחלה מבוהלת בראשונה. we also see this idea of inheritance that you get quickly. It says God doesn't like an inheritance that you get quickly. What does it mean? It says when there's a party and there's food, there's a Jewish saying that you don't go and rush, be the first one to grab the food. So it's the same thing over here. God says, when God was dividing the land, came Reuven and Gad, and they grabbed first. They said, we want this first. So it says there's no blessing with something you take first. When you take first, there's no blessing in it. נאמר בנוגע לבני גד ובני ראובן לבד. It was only told about the sons of Gad and sons of Reuven, and this sentence that about grabbing first was not mentioned when it comes to the tribe of Menashe. It says, what was the problem over here? It says they were now in a period of the 3 weeks, they were the first ones to get exiled out of the land when the destruction of the temple happened. They were the first ones to get kicked out because they reached them before they reached the land of Israel, so they exiled them first and then they exiled the land of Israel. So let's look inside. This is in Proverbs. It says, נחלה מבוהלת בראשונה ואחריתה לא תבורך. It says it's an inheritance that was grabbed first and the outcome is not going to be a blessed end. So Rashi explains, שנבהל למהר וליטול תחילה, so they went and they grabbed this land first, כגון בני גד ובני ראובן, just like the tribes of Gad and the tribe of Reuven, שמיהרו ליטול חלקם בעבר הירדן, they took their part in the other side of the Jordan, ודיברו בבעלה, and then they said things hurriedly without thinking, and they said, גדרות צאן נבנה למקננו. First of all, they were thinking about their flocks. They said, we're going to build places for our flocks. וערים לטפל, only then cities for our young. עשו את העיקר טפל, שהקדימו צאנם לטפם. They made the main part secondary and the secondary part main. In other words, the main part should be the children, the secondary part should be the flocks. ואחריתה לא תבורך, and it says, and there's not going to be blessing in it. Where do we see that? שגלו כמה שנים קודם שאר השבטים, because they were exiled first. Okay. So let's try to understand this whole procedure, what is going on. Second of all, there's another thing. הסיבה לבקשת נחלה בעבר הירדן, it says the reason why they ask for property in the other side of the Jordan, מפני שארץ מקנה היא ולעבדיך מקנה. They say this is a good land for flocks and we have a lot of flock. הייתה רק אצל בני גד ובני ראובן, was only by the tribe of Gad and the tribe of Reuven, כמפורש בקרא, ומקנה רב היה לבני ראובן ובני גד עצום מאוד. And it says it in the verses. The verses says, you know who had lots of flocks? Gad and Reuven. They are the one who had lots of flocks, more than any other ones. And not whom? And not Menashe. He didn't have a lot of flocks. So again, why is he on the other side? We have to discuss. וטעם הדבר שלהם דווקא היה מקנה רב עצום מאוד. So first of all, you have to understand, how come Reuven and Gad had so much flocks? What about the other tribes? They also had lots of flocks. Everybody came out with lots of flocks from Egypt. ומבואר בספרים. So this explains. It explains why specifically Reuven and Gad had lots of flocks. בנוגע לראובן, when it comes to Reuven is what? He was the firstborn. And the firstborn gets double the inheritance for everybody else. So if there's 10 tribes, let's say everybody gets 10%, Reuven is going to get 20%. It's a little bit less, but that's the idea. 20% for him, 10% for everybody else. So he got double than everybody else. So Reuven, we understand why he has a lot of flocks. בנוגע לראובן, מכיוון שליעקב היה מקנה רב, since Yaakov had a lot of flocks, הרי ראובן, שהוא בכור ישראל, נותן פי שניים. ראובן takes double. ובנוגע לגד, and when it comes to God, so it says, okay, so I understand Reuven why he has double. God decreed it that from Egypt they're going to come out with extra because he's the firstborn. So when he came out of Egypt, God made it for this tribe to have twice as much as all the other tribes. What about the Gad though? So it says, when it was God, the Torah tells us, לפי שהיו מחבבים את המן ביותר. God in the desert were not, you remember how the other tribes used to complain about the manna? It says it's going to kill us. Yeah? By the way, if you think about it, the whole complaint about the manna, it says, what are we going to eat? What are we going to eat? Give us meat. What do you mean give you meat? You have plenty of meat. Eat. Eat all your sheep. Eat all your cattle. It was just there as a complaint. It wasn't really what they want. This is why Moshe told them, even if you give them all the fish in the sea, they're still not going to be happy. It's not like they don't have meat. They have plenty of meat. They just want to complain. That's another thing. But it says God did not complain. Why did not God complain? They loved the manna. It says the tribe of God loved the manna. It says, like it says, there's a connection between it. It says, Vehaman kezera gadhu. It says the man was like the seed of God. Yeah? Haya haman ikar ma'achalam. So they loved the man. That was the main dish. Velo shochatu kol kach tzon o bakar kedei le'echol basar. So they didn't shecht a lot of flocks, a lot of sheep in the desert like the other tribes. The other tribes ate a lot of meat. God consisted of the man. So they had a lot of flocks. So this explains why Reuven and Gad had extra flocks more than everybody else. But when it comes to the tribe of Menashe, we know he didn't have a lot of flocks. So now, why did he want to be in the other side of the Jordan? Why didn't he want to go into the land? And why wasn't, and it looks like Moshe wasn't mad at him. He was only mad at them, at Reuven and Gad. So we have to figure out what's going on. So in order to understand this, we have to go to the beginning of everything. What's the beginning? The beginning is when God comes to Abraham, and God promises Abraham he's going to give him the land. I'm going to give you the land of Israel. So let's see what's the boundaries that God promised Abraham when God came to Abraham. So let's see source number 3. Bayom hahu karat Hashem et Avraham brit le'emor. In that day, God made a covenant with Abraham saying, Le'zaracha nati et haaretz hazot, to your seed I will give this land. Mina har Mitzrayim, you know what the land of Israel is? He promised Abraham it's going to be from the river of Egypt, which means the Nile, ad nahar gadol nahar Prat, until the great river, the river of Prat, Euphrates,
Iraq.
all the way to Iraq. That's right. Syria, Iraq, all these places, including what?
Jordan.
Including the other side of the Jordan. He promised. This is what he promised Abraham. Et hakini, et haknizi, ve'et hakadmoni. The 3 nations of Kini, Knizi, and Kadmoni that were on the other side of the Jordan, he also promised Abraham. ואת החיתי, ואת הפריזי, ואת הרפאים, ואת המורי, ואת הכנעני, ואת הגירושי, ואת היבוסי, and all the other 7 nations. So he promised him the 3 nations, and then he promised him also the 7 nations. When we conquered the land of Israel, what did we conquer? We only conquered the 7 nations. The 3 other nations we never conquered. It was never under our control, ever in the history. Not in the days of King Solomon, not in the days of King David, never. We never conquered the other parts. We only conquered the 7 nations. We didn't conquer what was promised to Abraham. And source number 4, it says, Ki aviacha Hashem Elokecha el haaretz asher ata ba. It says, when God is going to bring you to the land that you are coming to inherit, Venashal goim rabim mipanecha, is going to conquer, you're going to conquer many nations. And look, God himself says, you're only going to conquer the 7 nations. You're not going to conquer what? He doesn't mention the other 3 nations, Kini, Knizi, and Kadmoni. What does he say? You're going to only conquer the 7 nations. Hachiti, Hagirgashi, Ha'emori, Ha'knaani, Ha'prizi, Ha'chivuzi. Shiv'at goim rabim. And he specifically says you're only going to conquer 7 nations which are mightier than you. In other words, the conquering was only of the 7 nations and never of the 3 other nations. So what's these 3 other nations? Where did these three other nations come from? The other side of the Jordan. When is that going to be? Oh, so let's look at the Rambam. This is the Mishnah Torah. So it says, the Rambam says, Beimei HaMelech HaMashiach, in the day when Mashiach is going to come, Mosifim Shalosh Acherot Al Elu Hashesh. It talks about cities of refuge, where a person kills somebody else by mistake. Then it says, when Mashiach is going to come, you're going to add 3 more cities. Where? On the other side of the Jordan. שנאמר, ויספת לך עוד 3 ערים על ה3 האלה. It says you're going to add 3 more cities on these 3. והיכן מוסיפים אותם? Where are you going to add them? בערי הקיני, והקדנזי והקדמוני. In those cities, in those nations, Kini, Knizi, and Kadmoni, that we didn't conquer yet, which we are going to conquer in the days of Mashiach. Where did we, when we were supposed to get them? שניחרת לאברהם אבינו ברית עליהם. Because God promised it to Abraham, ועדיין לא נכבשו, and we never conquered them. ועליהם נאמר בתורה, and in these cities it says in the Torah, ואם ירחיב השם אלוקיך את גבוליך. It says when God is going to extend your land, you're going to get these nations. Now we're going to understand what's going over here. You have to remember, everything that happened to the Jewish nation happened to the forefathers. There's an expression that says, Ma'aseh avot siman lebanim. The actions of the forefathers is a sign for the sons. And what does it mean? It means Abraham went down into Egypt, right? And then Sarah was taken in Egypt. And then he came out of Egypt with great wealth. You remember Pharaoh gave him all the presents. This was a sign for whom? For his children. His children went down into Egypt and got out of Egypt how? With great wealth. So everything that was done by the forefathers is a sign for the sons that's going to happen later on. It's not just only a sign, it gives them strength to do it. So let's continue over here. Shevet Menashe, it says the tribe of Menashe had a completely different idea of why he wanted to be on the other side of the Jordan. רצה שנחלתו בארץ תהיה מעין ודוגמת נחלת הארץ לעתיד לבוא. He says, I'm going to force God's hand to give us Mashiach when? Now. It says, I'm going to try to bring Mashiach when? Mashiach now. Not to wait for another 2,500 years or 3,000 years for Mashiach to come. I'm going to pave the way. If it works, good, but even if it doesn't work, at least the Jewish nation, it's going to give them the strength to do it later on. ולכן ביודעו של העתיד לבוא יקבלו בני ישראל ארץ 10 אומות. Since Menashe knew that in the future we're going to get the land of the 10 nations, הן 7 אומות שבארץ כנען, the 7 nations that we conquered already, והן כל האומות שבעבר הירדן, and also the nations that in the other side of the Jordan, the 3 nations, קיני, קניזי and קדמוני, ביקש לנחול 2 חלקים בארץ. So he asked Moshe, I want already to prepare for Mashiach. But I also want part of the land of Israel. So half of us is going to prepare for Mashiach, and half of us is going to stay in the land. And this is going to be a preparation for the future. It says this is why the tribe of Menashe wanted to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Why did the tribe of Reuven and Gad wanted to stay on the other side of the Jordan? They cared about the materialistic. They didn't think about Mashiach. They couldn't care less about Mashiach. They said, because it's a comfortable life. That's why you want to stay here. That's why Moshe rebuked them. And he didn't rebuke Menashe. Menashe asked it in the correct way. They're asking for the same thing. They're asking for the same land. But he's only rebuking whom? Reuven and Gad. And not Menashe. ועל פי זה מובן העילוי של מנשה לגבי גד וראובן. Now we understand why Moshe thought that Menashe was great while Reuven and Gad were not, when it came to inheriting the other side of the Jordan. לבני גד ובני ראובן הייתה סיבה גשמית שהכריחה אותם לבקש נחלה בברידיהם. They cared about their flocks, about their money. By the way, they're still religious people. Don't make a mistake that they wanted all this money in order to open up casinos and to go on vacation and to go on cruises all day long. That wasn't the idea. The idea is to use the money for godliness. But nevertheless, they cared about physicality. Haaretz, and this is what they say, the land eretz miknehi, velavadecha mikneh. It says this is a good land for flocks, and we have lots of flocks. כלומר, יש להם צורך בארץ מקנה. We want this land not because of the future, not because of Mashiach. We want this land. Why? Because of the physicality of the land. כדי שיוכל לראות את מקנם. In other words, we're asking it for our flocks. And then the Rebbe explains, בוודאי שצורך זה על פי תורה. Don't think they're sinners completely. They're talking about physical things. שהרי התורה אמרה, because the Torah itself says, ונתתי עשב בשדך לבהמתך. It says, I'm going to give grass in your field for your animals. ועד כדי כך. And also you want to know why did they think about their animal first and only then about the children and the wives? Anybody knows why?
We have to feed the animals first.
It's a halacha. It's a Jewish halacha. ועד כדי כך, and until שאסור לאדם שיאכל קודם שייתן מאכל לבהמתו. A person is allowed to eat before he feeds his animal. Says the animal has to eat first. You're not allowed to eat until the animal eats. שנאמר, because over there the verse says, ונתתי עשב בשדך לבהמתך ואחרי זה ואכלת. And the land should be in your field for your animals, and only then you should eat. ומה גם, and furthermore, שכל התעסקותם בעניינים גשמיים אינה אלא כדי לעשות מגשמיות רוחניות. And they wanted the physicality in order to bring sacrifices, in order to make it into spiritual matters. אבל אף על פי כן, but nevertheless, Moshe didn't like it. סוף כל סוף היה לה מכרח בדבר מפני סיבה גשמית. They still ask it in a physical manner, and that's why Moshe didn't like it. ואילו לשבט מנשה, but the tribe of מנשה, לא היה מקנה רב. He didn't need grassland. ולא היה להם צורך בארץ מקנה. They didn't need this type of land. כך שלא הייתה שום סיבה גשמית שהכריחה אותם לבקש נחלה בברידיהם. The reason why they asked for a place in the other side of the Jordan had nothing to do with physicality. It was pure spirituality. הסיבה היחידה לבקשתם לנחול גם בעבר ירדן, the only reason they asked to be on the other side of the Jordan, לא הייתה אלא מפני שרצו לנחול מעין ודוגמת הנחלה לעתיד לבוא. They wanted Mashiach. This is what they wanted. That's why they wanted to be on the other side of the Jordan. It had nothing to do with physical things. We're going to see another proof of it for Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Where is it? In source number 6 it says like this. וידבר השם אל משה בערבות מואב על ירדן יריחו לאמור. And God talked to Moshe in the plains of Moab by the Jordan to say, צו את בני ישראל, it says, command the Jewish nation, ונתנו ללוויים מנחלת אחוזתם ערים לשבת. They should give to the Levites cities to sit in. The Levites are going to get 42 cities. Since the Levites are not going to get any part of agricultural land, they need a place to stay. Where did the Levites stay? In cities. That was the place of the Levites. ומגרש לערים ססבותיהם תיתנו ללוויים. Also you should give them a little bit of land, you know, if they want to grow some tomatoes or some cucumbers, whatever, a little bit to sustain themselves. But not agricultural land we're not talking about over here. ואת הערים אשר תיתנו ללוויים, and this is the cities that you should give to the Levites. את 6 ערי המקלט אשר תיתנו לנוס שם הרוצח, give them 6 cities of refuge, that if somebody killed somebody inadvertently, he should run away so he won't be killed. ועליהם תיתנו 42 עיר. And besides that, there should be 42 cities. והערים אשר תיתנו 6 ערי מקלט תהיינה לכן. You should put 6 cities of refuge in the area of Israel proper. את 3 ערים תיתנו מעבר לירדן. And 3 other cities you should put on the other side of the Jordan. Now, if you think about it, it's not fair. In Israel itself, there's 10 tribes. They only get 6 cities. Right? On the other side of the Jordan, there's only 2.5 tribes, and they get 3 cities. Why? So it actually explains that the other side of the Jordan, there were many murderers over there. There were many cases, the people were not nice people. The people lived by the sword over there. They were tough guys. So you needed more cities over there. ואת 3 הערים תיתנו בארץ כנען ערי מקלט תהיינה. So the three other cities should be over there. Okay. Again, but we still see that God himself is sending whom to the other side of the Jordan? The Levites. This is God himself. In other words, it's already in the plan. In other words, until now we thought that the other side of the Jordan is really not holy. Now we're noticing that even God himself says you should set up cities of refuge over there on the other side of the Jordan to prepare again. This is a preparation for what? A preparation for Mashiach. בפרשה מסופר על הערים שקבע הקדוש ברוך הוא לתת ללוויים. In the parsha it discusses the cities that God wanted to give the Levites. והתורה מפרטת אותם את 6 ערי המקלט. And the Torah says, this is the 6 cities of refuge, ועליהם תיתנו 42 עיר, and besides them you should give 42 other cities. ולאחר, by the way, the reason why the cities of refuge and the Levites have to live there, because there's a law that says that the majority of the people in the cities of refuge are not allowed to be murderers. So that's why there has to be Levites living specifically there. Otherwise, don't send only murderers into a city. That's not a good idea. The majority of every city has to be non-murderers. By the way, we're not talking about murderers over here. We're talking about inadvertent murderers. Somebody who killed for an accident. Negligent. Because it wasn't negligent, there's no... But somebody was negligent. He drove 60 on a 25 miles per hour on a 25 mile per hour zone and he killed somebody in his car.
Text and drive.
What?
He was texting and driving.
Texting and driving, good example. Very good. Yeah. ולאחר מכאן מופיעה פרשת ערי המקלט והתורה. מציינת 6 ערי מקלט היו 3 ערים, ולירדן 3 בארץ כנען. So there were 3 in the other side of the Jordan and 3 in the land of Canaan. ותמוה. And it's all understood. כיוון שאנו רואים שקבלת נחלה בעבר הירדן לא הייתה רצויה, since we assumed that in the beginning we thought that the other side of the Jordan is not proper, it's not proper Eretz Israel, it wasn't liked by Moshe, כפי שמובן מתוכחתו העזה של משה רבנו לבני גד ולבני ראובן, just like Moshe rebuked the sons of Gad and Reuven, כיצד ייתכן שהקדוש ברוך הוא יצווה לתת לוויים ערים לשב בעבר ירדן? How come now all of a sudden God tells the Levim to stay in the other side of the Jordan? ובוודאי לא היה זה משום שבט לוי חיפש מקום מקנה. For sure it wasn't because the Levites wanted a good place for flocks. שהרי על שבט לוי נאמר וילוו ושרתוך. Because that wasn't the job. The job wasn't to be flockmen. תפקידם הוא עבודה ושירת במקדש. They had to serve in the temple or teach Torah, but not be businessmen. לא עיסוק במקנה. They weren't supposed to be shepherds. אמנם צריכות להיות ערי מקלט גם בעבר הירדן. We know that we need to be cities of refuge also on the other side of the Jordan. והן נחוצות שם אף יותר מאשר בארץ-כנען. And they were necessary over there even more than in the land of Canaan. אך לא משום כך צריכים הלוויים לגור שם. But you don't need the Levites to stay over there. אך לפי המבואר, but now that we understand what we explained before, לגבי חצי שבט מנשה, we said that half the tribe of Menashe asked it in the proper manner, and Moshe was happy with them, מובן שהיא הנותנת to be יותר הדגשה. כאמור לעיל, like we explained above, שקבלת נחלה בעבר הירדן נחשבת לבלתי רצויה, הוא רק כאשר הדבר נעשה כבני גד ובני ראובן. When did Moshe like it? when it was asked like the way the tribe of Gad and tribe of Reuven asked, "Asher ratzu bekach mishum shechivu et emunam," they wanted it not for spiritual reasons, not because they wanted Mashiach. They wanted it because they wanted to live a comfortable life. אך עצם נטילת חלק בעבר הירדן עשויה להפך להיות דוגמה לירושת הארץ העתיד לבוא כדליל. But we're going to see it's exactly the opposite when it comes to the tribe of Menashe and the Leviim. ומשום כך אדרבה, and this is was, דווקא אצל שבט לוי לא נכשלו בחטא המרגלים. We see specifically that it was the tribe of Levi who didn't fall into the sins of the spies. Why? כי חיבבו ביותר את הארץ כמנשה. Because they loved the land like Menashe. By the way, how do we see that Menashe loved the land? Where do we see? So first of all, it says Menashe, the son of Yosef. And Yosef was known the one that loved the land. There's actually a verse. Why? Because he wanted to be buried there. Specifically, he told them, make sure you bury me over there in the land. But we see somewhere else that he loved the land. The Bnot Tzlofchad, the daughters of Tzlofchad, wanted an inheritance in the land. And Tzlofchad, their father, didn't have a son. And we see how much they fought that the land is going to remain over there. And over there it says, Tzlofchad, the son of Menashe, the sons of Yosef, again, to show us the love of the land that they had. The love of the land, we're talking about, they saw the holiness of the land. That's why they loved. So now we understand that the reason why they didn't enter the land is, you know what, we would have assumed until now that they didn't love the land. Just like whom? Like Gad and Menashe. But he says they did it because they loved the land. They looked at the other side of the Jordan just as holy as what? As the land of Israel, because they knew that one day it's going to become the land of Israel. That's how much they love the land. דווקא אצלם הייתה ישיבה בארץ בדומה לשאר עתיד לבוא. It says, by them it was like in the future already. It's like Mashiach came by them. It was holy already. שקיבלו ערים לשמט גם בעבר ירדן ולא רק בארץ גלותיה. Just like the Levites. The Levites and Menashe received the other side of the Jordan, and for them they asked it in a holy manner, and they received it in a holy manner. Page 13. So from here we're going to learn a message for us. על פי האמור לעיל מובנת ההוראה המיוחדת שלמדים ממנשה. Now we're going to learn something we learned from Menashe. גודל החפץ והכמיהה והתשוקה לגאולה העתידה. How much a person should yearn for Mashiach. We see that the tribe of Menashe yearned. It was hurting them that Mashiach is not here. That they said, we're going to bring Mashiach when? Now. We're going to so-called force God's hand. Already we're going to start the redemption right now. We're going to go into these cities that God did not tell us to go in. We're going to conquer it and we're going to be there right now. So it says, ישנם יהודים שטוענים, there are Jews that says, שטוב להם בגלות. It says, look, maybe 100 years ago, you know, when people were in the Holocaust, Europe 100 years ago wasn't a good place for Jews. But now over here in America, where have you ever seen yeshivas all over the place? Go to the east, go to the west. It says it's good over here. ומצידם יכל המצב הגלות להימשך עוד 2000 שנה. It says if it was up to me, look at the yeshivas, people are learning, everything is good, everybody is healthy. דבר הכי מבהיל אפילו לחשוב כן. It says this is something very frightening to think that people actually can think this way. הקדוש ברוך הוא זיכה אותו להיות במצב שביכולתו ללמוד תורה ולקיים מצוות. God merited this person to be in a situation where he can learn Torah and do mitzvahs, בהידור מתוך הרחבה, out of richness, וללא כל מניעות ועיכובים, and nobody else is bothering him, ובמילא כל זמן שנמצאים בגלות, but nevertheless, as long as a person is in the exile, צריך יהודי לעבוד את עבודתו. A person needs to do his work. אני נבראתי לשמש את קוני. It says, I was only created to serve my creator. בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, with all your might. כולל בכל ממונך, which means with all your money. בירור חלקו בעולם, וכל זה אכן עושה בפועל. And this I am doing. ומה שחסרה השלמות שתהיה בגאולה. It says, who am I to tell God when to bring Mashiach? says that's what a person may think. It says, I'm going to decide God, I'm going to force his hand to bring Mashiach now. I'm going to ask God, send me Mashiach now. He says, when God wants to send you Mashiach, he will send you Mashiach. You can't force his hand. That's what a person might think. It says, that's true. You can't force God's hand. But a person has to be at least מייצר ודואג ומתאונן על דבר שאינו באשמתו ואינו בשלימותו. A person is not worried about something that is not under control. And this is what we learn from the tribe of Menashe. Menashe could have said, it's not the time now to ask for it. It's not the time to ask for Menashe. But it didn't say that. It says, we're going to do everything in our ability to what? To bring Mashiach now. That's what they were screaming. And he says that this is the message we have to learn from them, from the tribe of Menashe. In other words, we want to be on the other side of the Jordan. Why? So Mashiach will be here now. He says, why should I be hurting that Mashiach is not here? Some people says it's the opposite. It's not going to. If I'm worried that Mashiach is going to come and I'm crying over every day that Mashiach is not here, I won't be able to serve God with energy. I won't be able to serve God with gladness of heart. From here we learn from the behavior of Menashe. שהיה חפץ ומשתוקק כל כך לגאולה העתידה. He wanted Mashiach, he wanted redemption to such an extent, עד שביקש לקבל נחלה שהיא מעין ודוגמת הנחלה שתהיה בגאולה העתידה. He asked for the land of Israel at the time that it's going to be in Mashiach. And he didn't need it. He didn't need it physically. He could have lived in the holy land of Israel. למנשה לא היה כל צורך בנחלה בעבר ירדן. He didn't need that land. הוא מצידו, מצד צרכיו האישיים, from up to his needs, היה יכול לנחול בארץ כנען יחד עם כל בני ישראל. He could have been in the holy land, together with the entire Jewish people. ללא כל צורך שחצי שבט יצטרף בני גד ובני ראובן. Without half the tribe joining the sons of God and the sons of Reuven, split his country in half. He didn't need that headache. דבר אחד בלבד היה אכפת ונוגע למנשה. But he did care about one thing. He cared about what? Mashiach. He said, I am going to make everything in my power to bring Mashiach now. יהודי יכול להימצא במעמד ומצב טוב ונעלה, הן בגשמיות והן ברוחניות. A Jew can be in a very lofty position, both in physicality and spirituality, לומד תורה ומקיים מצוות בהרחבה. He can learn Torah and fulfill all commandments out of greatness, out of plenty. אבל כיצד יכול הוא לנוח ולשקוט? But how can he be quiet and resting? כאשר עדיין לא באה הגאולה האמיתית השלמה, ומשיח is still not here. הייתכן שאינו מרעיש עולמות בקריאה וצעקה משיח נא? Is it possible that we're not crying every day to God, God, bring Mashiach now? יש לו אמנם כל טוב עולם הזה. It's true that today we live in America. We have all the best, better than in Israel over here in America. All the best in this world. And religious people, we all go to yeshivas, we do commandments, we're going to get not only this world, we're also going to get the world to come. But we still shouldn't be happy. אבל איזה ערך יש לזה לעומת הגאולה האמיתית השלמה? What kind of value does any of this has compared to when the time Mashiach is going to come? So this is what we learn from this week's passage.